Hello, everyone, and good evening. I'm Don Arleth, and you're watching World News Tonight, coming to you live from Warsaw. Another case closed in Russian sabotage attacks on Poland. Authorities say a 27-year-old Colombian man is behind two arson attacks last year, as he was supported by Russian intelligence services. The suspect is already behind bars, facing 8 years in prison in the Czech Republic for carrying out a similar attack. We'll have more on that in just a moment, but first, tonight's headlines. The Kremlin responds to Donald Trump's new ultimatum. We will continue special operations in Ukraine. Poland has applied for 45 billion euros from the EU for defense. And for the first time in its 130-year history, Skoda becomes Europe's #3 car maker. A 27-year-old Colombian man recruited and trained by Russia's secret services is responsible for 2 arson attacks in Poland last year, targeting construction depots with homemade Molotov cocktails. According to Poland's internal security agency, the attacks were part of a broader Kremlin-backed campaign to destabilize Europe and intimidate Ukraine's allies. As investigators uncover the identities behind these attacks, Russia's hybrid war against Europe is far from over. Kazimierz Wysiak has more.
Scenes such as these are becoming increasingly present across Europe. Foreigners hired by Russia throwing Molotov cocktails at poorly protected facilities. In Poland, the Internal Security Agency charged a Colombian man with doing precisely that, setting fire to 2 construction sites last year.
He first arrived in Madrid and then came here to Poland. We know that he had been earlier trained and instructed by a person connected with Russian intelligence services.
The 27-year-old is currently serving an 8-year prison sentence in the Czech Republic, as he was captured there after setting fire to a bus depot. In Poland, he is facing between 10 years and life in prison. And such incidents are nothing new here. One of the biggest shopping malls in Warsaw burned to the ground in May last year, in what was later confirmed as another Russian-orchestrated arson.
This is directed, as I said, against society, against the mood of the society to the future, and trust the government. This what happened in our country happened also in other countries. They do this, for instance, in Baltic countries, in Great Britain.
As one of the main goals of these operations is to spread distrust in public institutions, the Polish Prime Minister is appealing to the opposition not to add fuel to the fire on security issues.
Destabilizing the situation at Polish borders, the attempts to paralyze the work of our services are very close to the actual drastic acts of sabotage like arson. Anyone destabilizing the situation is directly or indirectly supporting Russian services.
As Poland is bordering Ukraine and is also located on NATO's and the EU's eastern flank, it's one of the main targets for Russian hybrid warfare. Just a few weeks ago, a migrant on the Belarusian side of the border threw a Molotov cocktail at Polish border guards. No one was hurt, but fire continues to be a weapon used by Russia across Europe. For TVP World, I'm Kazimierz Wysiak.
22 people were killed and 85 others wounded in attacks on dozens of Ukrainian cities and villages in the past 24 hours, proving the point that Vladimir Putin isn't interested in a ceasefire until all of his goals are met. U.S. President Donald Trump has shortened his deadline for Russia to make peace with Ukraine, and that deadline is fast approaching. Now for a Ukraine update with Randy Potts.
Monday night and into Tuesday morning, 22 were killed and 85 wounded in Ukraine following the latest barrage of Russian attacks. 73 cities and villages were targeted in the overnight attack. One strike hit a city hospital in Kamyanska and killed 3, including a 23-year-old pregnant woman. In another strike, closer to the front line in Zaporizhia in southeastern Ukraine, 16 were killed and at least 35 wounded at a correctional facility. Ivan Fedorov, regional governor of Zaporizhia, said 4 aerial bombs were used against the prison in Belenka, destroying the prison there and damaging nearby houses.
There was one bomb, then another one hit the canteen. Then there was a third one. It was dark, there was dust, people were shouting. Some were alive, some dead. Some had lost their legs, and half of the people were on fire.
The Russian strikes came just hours after U.S. President Trump, in a meeting with British Prime Minister Keir Starmer in Scotland on Monday, said he was frustrated with Putin's constant attacks on civilians in Ukraine.
I'm not so interested in talking anymore. He talks, we have such nice conversations, such respectful and nice conversations, and then people die the following night with a missile going into a town and hitting, recently, I guess, the nursing home, but they hit other things. Whatever they hit, people die.
Trump recently worked out a related deal with Brussels, wherein Germany, Norway, and other EU countries would spend around $10 billion buying U.S. weapons while sending existing stock to Ukraine. After these most recent attacks, Zelensky said he is ready to end the war as soon as Putin is willing.
Every murder of our people by the Russians, every Russian strike when there could have been a ceasefire long ago if Russia had not refused. All this shows that Moscow deserves very tough, truly painful, and therefore fair and effective sanctions pressure. They must be forced to stop the killings and make peace.
The Russians, for their part, had this to say of the continuing attacks and Trump's new deadline.
We have taken note of President Trump's statement yesterday. The special military operation continues. We would like to see more dynamics. We are interested in this. In order to move forward, we need impulses from both sides. We are still committed to the peace process to resolve the conflict around Ukraine and secure our interests.
President Trump's newest deadline, if it holds, will end between Thursday and Saturday, August 7th to the 9th. If the attacks don't stop and Putin hasn't agreed to a ceasefire by this point, Trump says there will be major repercussions. For TVP World, this is Randy Potts.
Nearly 300 Polish businesses have opened across the border since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, defying danger to support a nation under siege. For many, it's about more than profits. It's about solidarity, morale, and rebuilding trust in the face of war. But for people like Piotr Płoski, whose factory in Kyiv was obliterated by a Russian missile, the stakes are deeply personal. He refuses to walk away, and he's not alone. So what drives these entrepreneurs to risk everything when walking away would be so much easier? Natalia Komarov reports.
This is how it burns. 15 years of my life. I don't know what I'm going to do.
Piotr Płoski is one of many Polish entrepreneurs operating in Ukraine. He employs Ukrainian women who, after Russia's full-scale invasion, chose to stay and create wealth for their country. It only took a few Russian missiles to destroy what Piotr has been building since 2012.
Welcome to our summer office. A beautiful open space, isn't it?
Now, Operation Phoenix is underway. Piotr is rebuilding. The risks connected to running a business in a war-torn country are obvious, and yet Poles have opened nearly 300 companies across Ukraine since February 2022. These added to over 3,200 pre-existing Polish companies already operating on the Ukrainian market.
It's good for our morale. Ukrainians working in Kyiv or anywhere else in Ukraine see that Poles are staying here. They don't run. And as we can see from the example of Piotr Płoski, even after his whole business was destroyed, he is already planning to reopen in a new location. In a few weeks, maybe a month. This is very positive for us.
The Ukrainian government is trying to incentivize potential investors by offering preferential loan terms or special wartime insurance. On Tuesday, Polish MP Paweł Kowal, who heads the Parliamentary Council for Ukraine Cooperation, traveled to Ukraine to meet with representatives of the business world, both Polish and Ukrainian.
Yesterday, I met with Chairman Stefanchuk in Lviv, today with Minister Sabiha, so that we can support on a political level the operations of both public and private Polish entities, ones that create jobs and take part in joint ventures with Ukraine.
Poland is one of the biggest investors in Ukraine, together with countries like the US, the UK, France, or the Netherlands. Polish entrepreneurs, of course, want to make money, but at the same time, they know that supporting Ukraine is in Poland's long-term interest.
We remember how Poland's approach contrasted with the rest of Europe from the very beginning of the full-scale invasion. Poles just understand our situation better than Western Europeans because they feel the same threat. Of course, it's hard to expect a Portuguese person to feel it, and over the years, Poles learned how to live with this threat.
At the same time, Polish exports to Ukraine brought in over 10 billion euros in 2024, with more expected in 2025. Cooperation between the two neighbors is only expected to grow. For TVP World, Natalia Komarov.
Poland is the 10th country to have expressed formal interest in securing a loan from the European Commission to finance defense projects. According to Poland's defense minister, Władysław Kosiniak-Kamysz, the Central European country is eyeing 45 billion euro to fund a pool of projects, including bolstering Poland's border security with Russia and Belarus. Our EU correspondent Angela Skujins has more on this story from Brussels.
It was right down to the wire, but Poland made the cut. Late Tuesday afternoon, news broke that the Central European country had applied for a 45 billion euro loan to safeguard its defensive capabilities. Now, according to that country's defence minister, Władysław Kosiniak-Kamysz, the money will be used to support the activities of the Polish armed forces as well as Eastern Shield. This is the 700-kilometre border fortification separating Poland from its neighbours in Belarus as well as Russia. But the benefits also span beyond the material, according to that minister and his words posted on social media platform X.
Obtaining these funds is a tangible investment in the security and development of our defense industry. It also strengthens the security, deterrence capabilities and defense of the entire EU and NATO.
The European Commission's funding programme, also known as SAFE, comprises of a 150 billion euro pool of cash. Now, member states can apply for a slice of this to fund a range of defensive activities. We're talking about the procurement of ammunition and missiles, defensive systems, electronic warfare, and other projects. Now, although only 10 member states so far have formally expressed an interest to apply for a loan as part of SAFE, both the European Commissioner for Defence, Andris Kubilius, and his spokesperson are confident and optimistic that more will apply, which will deplete almost 100 billion euros in loans.
We are quite confident, and the Commissioner is also quite confident in his exchanges with member states that we can count on 20 member states at least to take safe loans.
But this isn't the final hurdle or the final deadline. Member states have up until November to lodge their last-minute ditch effort to get a pool of the cash. What we're hearing from our sources in the European Commission is that the money will then be dispersed over an incremental period depending on the success of the rollout of the projects. But what we're hearing is that member states may not have time up their sleeves. We know that many of them are a part of the NATO military alliance. They need to meet that 3.5% of GDP funding benchmark, but they will also need to dip into their coffers to make this happen. Angela Skujins from Brussels for TVP World.
Emergency services are continuing to monitor the flood situation across Poland after 2 days of torrential rain. Our reporter John Todd's in Bielsko-Biała in the southern Silesia region and has more.
I'm on the outskirts of Bielsko-Biała in the Silesia region in southern Poland. This bridge was submerged with water, cutting off houses on the far side. Fire crews used sandbags in order to prevent further flooding. I spoke to local neighbours about their ordeal, and this is what they had to say.
I didn't really experience any issues here. The firefighters brought us some sandbags, placed them around, but my neighbors were flooded.
Our whole garden was flooded yesterday. There was so much water we could go for a swim. The water went over the levees. The whole street was flooded. This flooding is the reason our bridge is falling apart, so I don't think we'll be able to drive across it. This is a small stream, but in 2 to 3 hours, it could change into a huge river that then floods our homes. The water carries large logs that cause the water to swell even more. This has been happening for years.
duże kłody drzewa, które zatrzymują wodę. No, to się powtarza od x lat.
Across the region here, there were some 800 call-outs. We heard from Interior Minister Marcin Kierwiński about the situation across the country.
Yesterday, the fire department responded to over 3,000 incidents, which shows how difficult the conditions were. While in the morning, the main focus of the services was on the Silesian region, where the situation in several places still requires close monitoring. Since the afternoon, it has been clear that the activities of the services have shifted north due to the weather, and today the north remains our main concern. However, I would like to emphasize once again that thanks to the dedicated work of the services and the army, despite the difficult situation, it is completely under control.
The situation has calmed somewhat in Silesia, but concern is growing in the north of the country, where in the city of Elbląg, firefighters are battling to save a hospital from flooding. Polish authorities put 2,000 soldiers on standby duty in order to be called up should they be required. The rain stopped in Silesia late yesterday, and the flooding, by my accounts here, has fallen by some 1.5 meters. But there's concern on the horizon, with further rain forecast for the end of the week. John Todd for TVP World.
Skoda, the Czech car producer, is proud to celebrate its 130th birthday while enjoying solid financial results for the first half of 2025 as the third best-selling car brand in Europe. Given the challenges the automotive industry faces these days, that's a pretty remarkable achievement. Let's go to Grzegorz Płaza's report for more.
Skoda Auto. The Czech automobile manufacturer, with a history spanning over a century, has just achieved arguably its biggest success to date. For the first time ever, it has become the third most popular car brand in Europe.
Skoda has kind of shown extreme resilience and success on the European market. For them, very important to grow in Western as well as Central Europe, and they have been extremely successful in the past 2 to 5 years.
In the first half of 2025, Skoda secured third place in Europe with over 412,000 vehicle registrations, trailing behind only Volkswagen Group with 748,000 and Toyota with around 440,000. And it has been a meteoric rise for what is a company that just 4 years ago was trailing at the bottom of the top 10 in Europe, with Skoda registrations in the first half of the year up by 58% compared to 2022. While Skoda's representatives point to electric vehicle sales as a major factor in their growing numbers,
our order numbers prove that our EV strategy is also on track. More than 120,000 orders for our all-electric new Enyaq and Elrock models were made by the end of June. This is how we've risen to become the third best-selling car brand in Europe from 10th place just a few years ago, as we grow European deliveries faster than the overall industry.
Experts point out that Skoda stands out not only thanks to their electric line.
One is definitely the well-balanced portfolio of great products, which I think combine nice modern design with something on top against the competitors, be it space, be it simplicity, be it some simply clever, which used to be their slogan, simply clever ideas like hidden umbrellas and similar. Then they, I think, balanced really well also the combustion engine, which they still hold the flag high for the whole Volkswagen Group.
Skoda is wholly owned by the troubled German automaker Volkswagen, which has recently embarked on a cost-cutting campaign that includes plans to slash 35,000 jobs by 2030. But Skoda itself is in a different position.
They do have an outlook on lowering the workforce within, I think, about 3 years' time or so. But it should be voluntary. It should be the kind of currently not occupied workplaces, not being filled, etc. So very gradual, very agreed with the trade unions, and effectively very gradual and natural.
Skoda's success is a major boost for the Czech auto industry, which accounts for 1/3 of the country's manufacturing output and 1/4 of all exports. Last year, the industry broke a new record with almost 1.5 million cars produced. Apart from Skoda, both Toyota and Hyundai also operate factories in the country. For TVP World, Grzegorz Płaza.
Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk on Tuesday said authorities have detained 32 people suspected of coordinating with Russia to engage in acts of sabotage. They include a Pole, Russians, Ukrainians, and Belarusians. So what types of attacks are they carrying out, and what can be done to prevent them? Joining me now is Paulina Piasecka, director at the Terrorism Research Center at Collegium Civitas. Hello, Paulina, and thank you very much for joining us tonight.
It's a great pleasure to be here.
Now, Donald Tusk has said that 32 people suspected of collaborating with Russia have been detained or arrested in Poland. Should we expect these attacks to continue? And is there anything we can do to try and prevent them? Or what should society do to stay vigilant?
Well, stay vigilant. Yeah. So to start with the very beginning of the question, unfortunately, I'm quite pessimistic as to the ceasing of Russian activities in Poland or Russian hostilities towards Poland and other countries in the region, because that's the only way in which we could assume that the attacks would stop, right? So I think that for as long as Russia is actually an actively engaged actor in pursuing hostile goals throughout the region, we unfortunately have to expect and see into the future that is threatened by the widely understood hybrid warfare tools of attack. Now, quite obviously, hybrid warfare is called the war amongst people. That's the war amongst civilians. That's the war below the threshold of war, which means that you are very right in saying that the society should be engaged to an extent in prevention of such attacks, because we need the partners in people. We need the millions of pairs of eyes throughout the territory of Poland, because however good our intelligence is and however good our intelligence cooperation with partners is, there's still more to look for and to look at when it comes to the threats.
Certainly. Now, how to respond to Russia? Poland says that it does not take part in any sabotage attacks within Russia. So should Poland just, from one side, sit there and just deal with the blows as they come, or should it respond somehow?
Well, I don't think that response to the Russian attacks that would be an open response would be treated as a response. It would probably be treated, at least by Kremlin, as an aggressive attack, because Kremlin does not admit to committing any dangerous criminal acts in the territories of other countries, right? That's all covert operations. And that's the terrifying beauty of hybrid war, right? You are doing things to destabilize, you are doing things to influence adversely other countries, but you are doing it below the threshold of war. So you're doing it in a way that actively disables the response mechanisms. And not only the individual response mechanism, it also makes completely helpless international organizations that would look for casus belli, right? There's no aggressive war, there is no aggressive act, so how can we come together and respond to such an attack? So I think the prevention, but the active defense, right? The far-looking early warning system, extensive cooperation with intelligence services throughout the region, and also with the allies that have the global reach when it comes to SIGINT intelligence, so signals intelligence, the technical intelligence. That's probably our best bet when it comes to looking into the future and trying to divine what might happen to us soon.
What types of attacks do you think it is that Poland is particularly vulnerable to, if you were to pick, I'd say, the top ones?
Okay, I'm, as a responsible citizen of Poland and a security researcher, I'm not going to talk about the most vulnerable targets. Even if I knew them, even if I had any insight into the weaknesses of security systems, I probably not talk about them, but what I can talk about is what might be an interesting goal of attack, right? And so there are two sides to this discourse. The first side is quite obviously Poland as the transportation, as the logistics hub for the support of Ukraine, which means that quite obviously transportation systems that are being used to transfer any weapons, arms into the Ukrainian territory. That would be an interesting goal for Russian activities. Any trains, any train hubs, these are the targets.
We know they've been interested in such you know, there's been people arrested for taking photographs of the transportation routes. But wouldn't that, you know, wouldn't an attack on, say, supplies coming into Ukraine, wouldn't that cross that threshold for an act of war, essentially?
That's provided that we would be able to prove that there are Russians behind that. Let me remind you that this is what started happening first in Crimea and then in Donbas region, right? This is never done overtly by the Russian operatives. The latest arrest, it's, I think, the Colombian citizen. And so what do you do then? How do you prove the connection? I mean, this is doable, at least in case of this Colombian, right? He's arrested. He's already, I think, supposed to serve 8 years in Czechia, and now the next trial is going to take place here. But that's the problem, right? You would have to be able to prove without any doubt that there is a state on the other side, and then there is a political decision. Once you are absolutely sure that it's the Russians on the other side, what do you do? Do you decide to say that, yes, we're at war with Russia? Is this the road that we want to take? This is not an easy decision, and it's not an easy decision not only because of the fact that war is a terrifying idea and that the amount of sacrifices and the level of tragedy that we're seeing in Ukraine is definitely discouraging when it comes to deciding that, yes, we're going to go to war. But also because these are the politicians who make decisions, and politicians make decisions based on the electoral cycle. Now, anybody in any country, not only Poland, that is going to say, yes, we're going to go to war, they're going to pay the price, the political price. And so it's never going to be an easy decision, and it's never going to be an easy interpretation, no matter how.
Okay, all right. So at what point is there a red line? There are, you know, a lot of these acts which we're seeing, we call them acts of sabotage or acts of hybrid war, but can't we call them acts of terrorism as well? And how bad does an attack have to be until it crosses this threshold to where a response would be elicited?
Okay, so these are all very good questions, and they're the questions that reach not only into the analysis of the current situation, but also into the very nature of both hybrid warfare and terrorism. Mainly because of the fact that that's the core, that's the nature of hybrid war. You are keeping it under this threshold of war by design. You are blurring the line between war and peace. You are weakening the decision-making mechanism. So if the attack obviously crossed this threshold, this red line, as you call it, that would mean that somebody messed up. Somebody on this hostile side messed up and allowed us to make this obvious decision, yes, we're going to war. That's the first thing. The second thing is, with terrorism, terrorism might be treated rather as a part of this wider toolbox in hybrid war, because there are many tools in the toolbox of hybrid war, right? We're talking about the acts of sabotage, we're talking arsons, we're talking the sabotage of, say, transportation routes. We're talking, for example, information campaigns, political campaigns, we're talking disinformation, we're talking, well, economic instability, disinformation that might lead to the market panic. So there are so many tools, which, by the way, are very interestingly listed in the Russian military doctrine of 2014 that lists the characteristics of the modern conflict environment. And just by chance, it lists all of those tools, including, for example, the use of the political protests financed and directed from beyond the borders of the target territory, which is extremely interesting, but I would treat terrorism as one of the tools in hybrid war. And again, hybrid war, if it ever crosses the red line, it's going to cross this red line because we decided that it crossed the red line, because we reached the point at which we feel ready and we feel that we can go to war, not only should, but also can go to war with the fair chance of winning that confrontation.
Well, let's hope we don't get to that point or cross that red line. Paulina Piasecka, director at the Terrorism Research Center at Collegium Civitas, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
And that concludes this edition of World News Tonight. Thank you all for joining us. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you next time. Good night.